This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
Put your hands down, will you? You're embarrassing us.
Oh, your teacher. Well, that's gonna be a big help.
Grab the snake!
Stop calling it that!
It's a snake. What do you want me to call it?
Say rope!
What?
Say grab the rope! Somewhere your grandpa is laughing.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the fourth and what we thought for a long time final film in the Indiana Jones franchise, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, are two of my favorite podcasting archaeologists because you were very much students and historians of the world of podcasting and popular culture. Of course, I'm going to talk about, first, the co-creator of Coffee with Kenobi, wearing a fedora, Mr. Cory Clubb.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here and ready to talk Indiana Jones.
All right. Well, I'm not wearing a fedora because it doesn't work with the headphones. I do not have the fancy earpods that you have. Earbuds. I call them air pacifiers when my students wear them. All right, we've got that chuckle you hear. This gentleman is a podcasting legend in his own right. He has many shows under the Marvin Dog Media umbrella, as well as Star Wars Splash Page. Of course, you know who I'm talking about, Mr. Count Jeff McGee.
You said legend in his own right. I think you meant legend in his own mind.
I'll fix it in editing.
Yeah, you fix it in post. But yes. No. Thanks for having me. We all know I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. Keen with a Crystal Skull. We'll talk. But
indeed, how about tonight?
I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very excited about Dial of Destiny coming up. I actually mentioned in my class today. I said I got tickets to go see Dial of Destiny tomorrow. Anybody else going to see it? And just crickets. And I said, I didn't realize you all hated life.
Right. Yeah. I didn't realize your parents. Yeah, that's just crazy. All right. The fact that there's a new Indiana Jones film, we're recording this on June
the eve
28th. Yeah, so it's the eve. It comes out the 30th, Dial of Destiny, but technically we all know it really comes out the 29th. It went from midnight showings to pretty much all day, and we're happy about it. But before we get there, we've gone through all these films in release order. This is, of course, as we said, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Cory, we'll start with you.
Okay.
You know it's coming. Give me one word to describe this film for you and overall thoughts on it.
Oh, boy. I hadn't thought of a one word. I'll start with overall thoughts. Maybe the one word will come to me. Overall thoughts, like this was like the rejuvenation of Indiana Jones. It's been a long time since Last Crusade. Obviously, that was an epic movie. And, this was coming into the era of, eras of being old. I always felt like he was just kind of, the middle-aged guy forever. And like, I was like, oh man, he's got to be too old to play Indiana Jones for Crystal Skull. Like, I feel like, how is this going to work? And is it going to be too old? And obviously, sitting on the eve of Dial of Destiny, we were waiting for another movie. So he's relatively younger in this one. So again, like this was a new adventure. I would hoped. I didn't know what to expect. What the Crystal Skull was originally when it came out. A lot of theories out there that it was all kinds of stuff and aliens. Okay, it's a Spielberg thing, a Lucasfilm thing. I get that, but I was ready for a new adventure. I was ready for something fresh and a rehash of Indy's misadventures and such, and new characters. So I was looking forward to it originally when it first came out. But overall, it's a low light for me. Indiana Jones trilogy. It's pretty much the lowest for me. I know that Adalsta likes to say that it's one of his favorites, and he's kind of won me over the years. I always try to revisit it, think, okay, what is wrong with this? Why don't I like this? Why should I like this? And there's a couple scenes that just don't work for me. Some of the characters don't work for me, and the storylines just don't work for me. So that's where it kind of falls off. But after having said that, my one word would be faulty. There you go.
Okay.
Faulty.
Very good. Jeff, what about you?
Well, I'll go in the front order. The one word I would use to describe it is frustrating. And that is because, much like Cory, I don't hate Kingdom of the Crystal Skull the way some people do, but I also do not love it as much as our friend Ed Dollista. There are so many things about the film that I love, but for everything that I love, there is something else that just leaves me either scratching my head or covering my eyes or just wondering, doing the little pug head tilt, going, what were they thinking? So it's Cory mentioned faulty. It's a very flawed film. And as we talk about it, we'll talk about the fact that I the first half of the film I love.
Yeah.
The second half is where it really starts to fall apart for me. And it's every level. It's screenwriting, it's in some cases performance, it's effects, it's cinematography, it's everything. It's just frustrating. That's the one word I can use to describe it.
Okay.
Make sure you say an F word, just so you know.
Oh gosh, the one word I would say to describe Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is underrated.
Oh,
I really
you mean
like
fun-rated
a lot. No, I mean I really I've said from the beginning, Ed and I have always bonded over many things, but especially over this. For the longest time, I said this was my second favorite Indiana Jones film.
wow.
And I'm going to give you plenty of reasons why that is. Now, I watched it last night before recording the show today with the two of you esteemed gentlemen, because Mason had never seen it. Now, Mason has seen all of the existing Indiana Jones films, and then tomorrow we're going to see the new one together as father and son, which I can't wait for. The reason this movie is special to me, it just hit perfectly for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into. But I think there's some really important themes and ideas that do show up throughout this that make it really, really strong narratively. That being said, there are some challenges with it that do not work as well for me, but we're gonna dive into that. And this is, one of the reasons why people have been so supportive of Coffee with Kenobi, because while we don't like everything, we're gonna find constructive, intelligent ways to talk about what worked and what did not work for us. So I'm going to actually switch it back, and let's just kind of take it through. Jeff, you mentioned the first half you really liked. So let's talk about what we really, really liked about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Only focusing on that for this portion of the show. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, so the thing that I loved about the first half, and this is something that was getting set up that didn't really pay off for me.
That's not a negative. We're focusing on the positive.
No, I know. But I'm saying this is something that was good that I wish we'd gotten more of, and it may be that they did, and I just didn't catch it. So I'm hoping you can shed some light on that, Dan. But they were setting up, talking a lot about the passage of time and how as we age we lose things. In fact, regardless of my feelings of the film, it did give us one of my favorite film quotes of all time, which was when Jim Broadbent, they were looking at the statue of Marcus Brody, and he said, "We seem to have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away." Mm-hmm. And you both know that I've lost both my parents and everything. So when this came out, when I heard that line, it really, really resonated with me. And that is enough for me to put this in the pretty good camp, that single line alone, let alone Jim Broadbent's delivery of it. Mm-hmm. But, the dealing with the passage of time, getting older and all of that, I really, really responded to and really enjoyed. And even the everything that took place on the college campus, I was a big fan of. Even the chase through the college, the chase into the buildings and everything. I didn't even mind the introduction of Mutt Lang with the Marlon Brando from The Wild One get up that he had. I caught that reference as soon as it popped on screen, and that's the part of it that felt like an Indiana Jones movie to me. The first half just really felt like an Indiana Jones movie to me, and that's what I really responded to. And I loved the way they updated it to the 50s. Just really, really worked for me. I didn't even mind nuking the fridge. I didn't mind that at all, because it's in keeping with all of the other ridiculous things that we've seen Indiana Jones do and survive. So that's really what I responded to, is the opening section of the film up to about halfway till they got to the jungle. That's when it started falling apart for me. It didn't completely, but that's when it started. But that first half is really just what I responded to. That's it. Again, it just felt like an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, that line you mentioned, I think about that line. I've thought about it regularly since this movie came out in 2008. It's absolutely perfect. They're in Indy's study. He's looking at it. He comments on losing his dad and losing Marcus. And then he says, we've reached that point in life where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away. It's just so beautiful, insightful, somber, but there's also some love behind it. And I feel like there's a lot of that in this movie. Cory, what are some things that work for you, specifics?
Yeah, specifically, I really like the opening scene where they're at the warehouse and we get a payoff kind of with the end of Raiders and, that ominous, crate. I thought it was just a fun place to be. Indy amongst all kinds of unknown objects in a weird area. And just like, I always thought in my head when this starts off, they pull him out of the trunk and he's kind of beat up and whatnot. And he picks up the hat and puts it on and they have the iconic shadow of him, getting back into character. And I was like, man, they just came from an adventure or something. Like you could just tell he was just already had just, retrieved something or getting after something or just like, I feel like they just come from the last adventure. So it was a really good entry point. I think it felt like you were, okay, let's get this thing kicked off. Let's go. And then we get introduced to some great villains. Kate Blanchett as the villain there, very, evil and conniving and that bowl haircut, kind of like that short cropped haircut. And just, she was very striking and just oozed, a classic villain. And like you said, it's Indiana Jones doesn't take itself seriously and can get away with that kind of stuff. I agree with you, Jeff. It's the campus and him, going to his little office and like escaping out the window. I was like, he still is old, but yet he's young, making himself feel like he's younger still. He's still trying to figure out ways to sidestep into the next adventure or move ahead with something. And I love the fact that Harrison Ford is still bringing that to the character. He's trying to find that next adventure. And I felt that with this. He doesn't feel as old as you think he is. And then, like you said, leading up to, meeting up with Mutt, I thought Shia LaBeouf did a great job. He's a great actor in this film. Another new character to the franchise that introduced us, to this. And I think the hope as Indy fans, you're like, okay, this is the, passing of the hat, if you will. And everyone's waiting for that moment, we kind of see at the end, it doesn't happen. But, there's this idea of like, you want to carry this tradition on. So that was like I was hoping this movie would give us that. And so there's a essence of that going through this. But when they do get the jungle, you get the reveal of Marion again, which was fantastic. I loved that part. I loved the part where they're all in the Jeep, haggling and arguing and who's going to do what. And the adventure back and forth on the Jeep was fantastic, that whole thing. But then the part that gets me the most, that I feel like it just starts to go sideways. I guess maybe we'll talk that later.
Yeah,
but,
we'll get to that.
Okay, well, I'll save that for my thumbs down part.
Your quibbles.
I should also mention at this point that I have had a crush on Kate Blanchett since 1998 when the first Elizabeth film came out. And that crop cut that she had, that bob cut that she had, really, really does it for me. That's all I'm going to say about it. Yeah.
She's great. And every time she uses that rapier, the way she moves and poises, I mean, she's just so precise. She's great. And
she's quite possibly the greatest living actor. One of, I think you could make the case.
I don't disagree with that one bit, and you would know because you actually are a professional working actor. So I definitely take what you say with a very, very high esteem. There are so many things I love about this particular film, and the best part about the film for me is Harrison. I mean, I could be wrong. My math is not the best. But I believe that Harrison Ford was 65. 65 when this movie came
65
out.
when they filmed it, yeah.
When they filmed it. And it came out in 2008. So look at this man. There's this sequence early on where after he gets exposed to all that radiation and they're cleaning him off and he's shirtless and they're scrubbing him down. Do you see the shape that man is in at 65? I mean, way better than us, and we're much reasonably younger than that. I hope I'm that good of an age at 25, let alone 65. Are you kidding me? But that's all superficial. I mean, no, it's not. Kudos to him for his nutrition and his his discipline, and just the way he keeps his mind, body, and soul constantly ready for the next adventure, whether it's Indiana Jones or something else. But he is such a good actor in this film, and in everything that he does, he's terrific. But it's the way that he acts when he first runs into Marion and he becomes this lovesick schoolboy, and he giggles and he shrugs his shoulders and he seems sort of verklempt. That I have goosebumps every time I saw that. I got goosebumps last night when I saw it. He's so taken with her. And then my second favorite line is a line you mentioned, Jeff, but my first favorite is when they're arguing in the back of that truck. And we know when Indiana Jones is in a truck, awesome things are going to happen. And she says to him, there must have been plenty of women over the years. And he says, there were a few, but they all had one problem. And she says, what's that? And he says, none of them were you, sweetheart, or none of them were you, honey. And she gets a smile and he climbs out, and more goosebumps, because I'm just like, that love is so pure.
That chemistry.
I just learned today that Marion's theme and Leia's theme from the original Star Wars use the same chord construction, and just they play with a little bit with certain notes, but there's just something wonderful about that honesty, and building upon that, him being very honest and cool, and like the cool mentor, laid back guy. You know what? Don't let anybody tell you different. If you don't want to go to school, if that's not for you, follow what you love. And then as soon as he finds out that Mud is his father, or that is his son, while he's in that sinkhole, he screams when he's going to die. Why aren't you in school? You need to get back to school. And that becomes his whole focus. That is so realistic. You know, I'm a teacher and I'm a dad. You know, I'd like to think I've got a nice level playing field, but of course, when it comes to certain advice, you're going to be a little bit more biased or insistent when it's your own children. And we see that. The parallel that Harrison Ford and Sean Connery have in in Last Crusade, is flipped in this movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, with Mutt and Indy. Yeah. And I think the way that they bookend those things and the way they flip it is terrific character stuff. And these are the reasons why I love this movie the way I do.
Yeah, I think that now that we're talking through this, there's a good things that I think the movie's trying to do. Like you said, that father-son relationship, all Indiana Jones relationships with those he'd lost, those are coming back into his life. Just new characters. We had Mac, played by Ray Winstone. Winston, yeah. So it's all these kind of things, like these characters coming back around, and it's interesting. They always introduce new people along the way, of their allies, for the enemies. And they did such a good job of casting. I think the characters and the actors did all fantastic work. It's just, I think there's none a bad cast, and even the I don't know, the tall Russian guy, the gruff guy, Ant Food. There you go. He was even like, it just has a unique look to him that it just oozes, bad guy. And so I think that they've done have a fun time doing this. And even Harrison Ford, I think, like you said, he's at 65. Which, wow, I look back at that, man. It doesn't feel as old, but it's just, he's still doing it. He's still out there enjoying it. And like you said about him with meeting with Marion too, that boyfulness, that cheerfulness, he just like falls into a completely different character. He's excited to be here. They're talking, they're catching up, and it's such great chemistry there.
So, Jeff, does my the things I love about does that resonate with you at all?
Well, it does, and what you said and what Cory just said just reminded me of why, and if I can be a little negative here, why the movie doesn't work. It's because, or why it's so frustrating, is because there are so many elements. All of the elements in it are good, like the idea of flipping the script and having him be the father to a son that he doesn't quite approve of just yet, that he doesn't really know that well yet. It's great. The reuniting with Marion is great. Like Cory said, the villains are great. You can't go wrong with Nazis for like the replacement for the Nazis that we had there. And Ray Winston as this double triple agent, you don't know what he's going to do. That character is so interesting. John Hurt, for Pete's sake.
Oh yeah,
he's great.
As Ox, and the storyline. The storyline is a little goofy, but I don't mind it because, again, it's Indiana Jones. Why none of those elements coalesce? They don't all coalesce and give us something that's greater than the sum of its parts, I put down to just the filmmaker at that point. I think Spielberg wasn't as invested, but that's why it's so frustrating to me, because everything about it is good and should work. So I watched it recently, watched it with Riff Tracks commentary, which is hysterical. If you want to spend $4 or $5 to go download the MP3 of that, it is hysterical, and everything they joke about is earned and accurate. But every time I watch it, I just keep thinking, I want to like this. I should like this. This should work. Why does it not work?
Well,
that's where I come down on it.
I want to talk about the supporting cast and some iconic action sequences, because it is an Indiana Jones film. But let's talk about the things that don't work. Jeff, you've certainly started to explain that to us, which I appreciate. Are there other specific, like, connect some dots for us? And again, we're not going to just rain on it, and you guys aren't those kind of people anyway, but kind of fill in the blanks, or what are the things that just did not work for you because of, well, whatever reason?
Well, the main thing that doesn't work, the way it's shot. Every time I watch it, it doesn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie. All of the shot compositions feel more like a television series to me. Everything seems like it's shot in like a mid close up, instead of, we have a few of the sweeping panoramic shots that we have in the other films, but for some reason, the way it's filmed feels small. And I think it's because I read somewhere that Spielberg shot it on film, but when it was processed for digital, that's where we got it. It's got just kind of a gloss or a sheen to it, where everything just seems a little gauzy. That's the best way I could put it. Corey, do you get what I'm saying with that?
I see what you're saying. It's like when they had the new Star Wars movies, they're like, oh, it's not dirty and crummy enough. Like, it doesn't feel grimy. Like A New Hope. And I feel like you want that feeling of like old but new type feeling.
Right.
And I think you're right.
I'm fine with it being crisp, but it's too smooth. It looks like the whole thing was shot with a TikTok filter or something over it, or a Snapchat filter over it, to me, to kind of smooth off the edges. And it's never more apparent than when they're going through the jungle. There's the sequence where Mutt is fighting. He's straddling two Jeeps, and he's doing the sword fight, which was, I think, either just before or just after the infamous scene where he had to swing through the jungle with the monkeys. Yeah. That sequence just looks cartoonish to me. Yeah. And like I said, just everything about it, it's the wrong kind of crisp. And that's the thing, is it's not crisp. I want crisp. It's smooth. And everything is just sort of, it almost feels like it was filmed with like soft focus lighting of some sort. And that's the main thing, that it just doesn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie to me. It feels like they're on sets instead of out in the real world.
It's interesting you say that, because it doesn't, like you said, the movies nowadays that use special effects have a good blend where you're kind of scratch your head thinking, oh, is this real? Is this CGI? I don't know yet, because it's that good. And I think they're in this era of like, let's see how close we can get.
Right.
Obviously lowering budget, and the fact that we don't have to go and, you go for days on a shooting location or, whatnot. They're in a soundstage or something like that. They've built these sets and trying to whittle down the price tag. And of course, Spielberg and Lucasfilm want to utilize the best technology possible. We've seen that being used in The Mandalorian too. It's like they're trying to do it with every entry in this, not all the Indiana Jones stuff, but all the kind of Lucasfilm type stuff. They're trying to up the ante, and I think this just doesn't work. You mentioned the Mutt swinging, and it just takes you out of the movie. Even you said the guy that gets eaten by the live ants. It just doesn't feel like a practical effect. Like, I can get past somebody's face melting and their eyes turning to a skull, like we've seen other ones, and it was all like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me. Like, but because it takes me out of it, I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, it's just like the timing of all of that, some of that stuff just doesn't feel real. I don't. That sounds weird, but like, but it's just like the way that they okay. So the tank scene in Last Crusade, where they're all separated, Indiana Jones is trying to get to his dad, trying to figure things out, and he kind of circumvents his his area of effect and getting around to them, and he ends up falling off the cliff, that type of thing. Where they separate again in this movie, and Mutt's way off in the jungle, and he has to get back to the group, and he has to start swinging these vines. Like, it just doesn't make logical sense. I mean, I'd rather him like grab a motorcycle, because we've seen his motorcycle skills already, and like utilize that to get back up to the group. And it just doesn't make realistic. There's no way he can swing on branches to move up to a moving vehicle like that. It doesn't make sense. It takes me out of it for that. And then I wanted to comment one more thing.
Killing
next.
me. Thank you.
Much as
I'm just setting you up to prove us wrong, Dan.
The characters are so good in this. The plot kills them, because the plot, it doesn't make sense to me. Like I can't grasp it like I can some of the other ones. Oh yes, a jungle, heartless villain looking to possess, and use voodoo and whatnot to, I feel like that works. The other things are built around a history that lives in our world. Crystal Skull, like what tangible things do we have that we've seen that in media, we've seen that around the era, through the times and eras, that I can connect the dots to. Oh, look back in history. Yeah, that's right. There was some things there, but nothing. There's nothing that connects that other than, some of the ancient archaeological stuff, and aliens being involved, like the pyramids and such. But like, it just, I guess I can't grasp that. And that's where the plot kind of falls apart for me. Like, I want to root for it, but then it doesn't feel, I don't know, real enough, set in our world. There's a little bit of realism that's not there for me.
So yesterday, after we watched the movie, before we saw the movie, Mason goes, "Dad, is Jesus a part of this?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, like the Lost Ark, or the cup of
Relics.
Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the actual, Holy Grail itself. I said, "No, this isn't. This is based on something more science fiction." And I explained him what science fiction means. He had a pretty good grasp on that. And then I said, "Well, what about Temple of Doom?" Temple of Doom is not based on something that's Christian based, but it's still spiritual, because it's a different God. In fact, there's a great line in King of the Crystal Skull. It says, when he says God's head isn't shaped like that, and Indiana Jones says, depends on who your God is. The Temple of Doom, I haven't rewatched it recently for this retrospective we've done the last week or last month on Coffee with Kenobi. The narrative structure on that is just as flawed, if not worse, than this movie. Effects wise, it's certainly different too. I think the challenge, and just presupposing, I can't pretend to fully understand what you guys mean in your hearts, but you're explaining it well. I think this is the first Indiana Jones movie with CGI, because CGI didn't exist for the first three films. So
right,
it makes sense that would throw you off, because what to this point has been practical effects and matte paintings and camera work and acting and some trickery with John Williams' baton. So I get that part of it. I'm certainly aware that some parts of the CGI are a little strained, although it's still really pretty good for the most part. I see what you mean with the sheen. I think that was just sort of, like you said, Lucas and Spielberg kind of messing with cameras and camera work in post and digital stuff coming into play. So I see all that. The fridge thing that you mentioned earlier has never bugged me. That's just as realistic as surviving a crash from an airplane in a life raft. That would kill you. He would have even, because that movie takes place before Raiders, there would have been a Raiders Lost Ark, because that wouldn't have existed. The monkey thing I thought was cute. It's just light. I mean, Mutt is a character not to be taken super seriously. Indiana Jones would have died within the first 10 seconds of the first movie we ever saw, probably first minute. So none of that stuff strains the credulity for me, because I expect fantastical craziness, just like with James Bond or anything else. Now, this is about verisimilitude. So if the story that you're being told and a lens you're being told to digest it in is not working for you, then that's okay. That's absolutely your prerogative to say, you know what, this takes me out of the film. That doesn't take me out of the film. If there's anything that takes me out of the film, it's that as soon as Mutt and Indy travel, and Indy puts on his iconic stuff and does his iconic put the foot over his head and take his nap, we see the red arrow going through the maps. Once we get to this like prison, where all of a sudden he starts sweeping, and then we move to the scene where they're in this graveyard, and then we're all of a sudden in this thing, and they find the crystal skull, and there's a lot of like great back to back moments of Indy solving puzzles and having cool action stuff and always knowing what to do. But the problem for me with this is that I don't follow the threads there. I don't even know if the actors follow the threads there, but they pull it off. And after a while, even last time, like, I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to follow the conceit. Does it make narrative sense? Not really. Him sweeping and finding these things on this prison floor is cool. It reminds me of Raiders in the Tannis map room. But it's still, they're not drawing any lines to show me why that works. In Raiders, everything works. Well, Raiders was nominated for Best Picture, right? I think we can't compare this movie to Raiders because that movie is so iconic for so many different reasons. This one doesn't work like that. Indy, one of the reasons I have always liked Indy, especially in the first three films, is that he's super flawed. He doesn't always make it look easy. It's hard for him. I would say almost most of this film, besides a little bit at the beginning and some of the fight scenes, because the person he's fighting is much bigger and younger than him, is that Indy never is like sweating. He never seems like he's strained. He's not bleeding. He's not in any kind of trouble. He's like the Deus Ex Machina. Everything he does works beautifully. Like he never really struggles in this movie. Now, some of that is because he's older and because he's had a ton of experience and wherewithal. And I'm glad. If he's always being a buffoon, then it's harder to believe that he would still be alive. But if anything, that is what stretches it for me a little bit. And the fact that once, like we said, once he travels mud and they get to the jungle, then I've never really loved that part of the film. In fact, it could probably benefit from 20 minutes of editing. We'll just kind of trim out some of it and made it a little bit more tight narratively from a constructionist perspective. But I agree with the jungle stuff, while fun, all the way late to the end is interesting. I don't think Mac is interesting at all. I think he's probably my least favorite character in Indiana Jones's films. So anyway, there's a lot there.
Yeah, no, I think what you said about that is true. Like you mentioned, it can't compare it to Raiders, but it has to because it's Indiana Jones, right?
Sure.
It's like saying Star Wars can't compare to Star Wars. You have to. That's the only thing in its own league.
Right.
So the way that Raiders marks out the relics and he's drawing the chalkboard and like the few minutes of that exposition of like understanding what they're going after, what it does, what it's the MacGuffin, right? So it's like us as audiences, we're understanding it just as the characters in the film are understanding it, and they don't really have that necessarily with this crystal skull. Like I can't wrap my head around this because it doesn't feel real with the crystal skulls. Like, okay, we go and find this crystal skull, great. And there's a bunch of versions of it, it connects to aliens and maybe there's some Aztec stuff built in. And like, you mentioned him going into a tomb in this thing. And they go down, watching this, they go into it, they kind of hunt around a little bit. There's really no traps necessarily. He's just kind of looking for something and pushing things over and finding stuff. They come out and it's like daytime. How long have they been down there? Like, what are they doing? Like, I don't understand. Like, so it's like the passage of time doesn't seem to work. And the sequence I dislike the most out of this is when they finally figure out where to go, and they're at the little encampment there in the jungle. They pull out the map. He's like, "Get me a map," and they're all like, everyone's just leading them. They're like, hey, everybody's kind of engrossed with him. They'll forget who's bad and who's good. Let's all we're all gonna figure out this puzzle together. And they go at the map, and then all of a sudden, Mutt runs off with the skull and like into the jungle, and then they fall in the quicksand, and like they get nowhere. Like it doesn't. What is the point of that scene? Is it to like just show that Indiana Jones needs help as well? I don't know. It's just like
to use the snake to pull him out of that. That was a fun scene.
That was a fun scene, yeah.
I didn't like that scene though. It felt like if he doesn't like snakes, he's like, get something else. Like it's like his worst fears come true.
Well,
like,
of course.
He'd rather just be sucked by quicksand and be done. Like that's it. Like, and then they get captured again. I think like what they ran 5 feet in the jungle and fell in this quicksand. Like, was it
because Oxley goes and they say get help, and then Oxley goes and gets help because he's not in his right mind. So he accidentally gets help from the wrong people.
I know, but like what are we trying to learn from that scene? Is
well,
there something?
I don't think there's anything to learn in anything from any Indiana Jones movies per se. I think they're not big. They're not really heavy on character. They're heavy
I shouldn't say
fun.
Learn anything, but like as far as the plot goes, like how are we furthering the plot with this?
I'm with you there. And
That's my
if
thought.
if I can jump in, I talked about my favorite line from the film in the first half. The second half has a line that is as cringy as a series of lines that is as cringy as the first one, and it's at the very end. Their treasure was knowledge. Knowledge was their treasure. That's that's dialogue. That's a monologue in this film, folks. He says the same thing twice, just in reverse order. It's basically a palindrome of a line.
Well, he's a professor, and he wants his son to go to school. I like that. I know what you're saying, though. I know what you're saying.
But
I don't know. I like
Dan,
the. Go ahead.
To respond to what you were saying, Dan, I understand about the effects and everything, and if it was just the effects, that I could get over it. I honestly could. Bad effects, they take me out of it for the moment, but they don't ruin a movie for me. But it's just everything before that. It's just like I said, it's that gauzy, soft focus lighting. I don't know if Spielberg was going for sort of a Douglas Sirk look from the 50s, because his films were known for having those very bright, vibrant colors and everything, and being sort of angelically lit. I don't know if that's what he was going for. If it was, it just didn't work. I think they made choices and the choices didn't work. And as far as the script, it really feels like the script to me either needed one more draft or one less draft.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. I really think that once we get to the jungle, everything just kind of becomes about action scene to action scene, and there's not, and the fact that Indy, you're never worried about Indy dying at all, or anybody in this film dying, I think is challenging. What I think that's smart about this film is I love that, the originals take the serials, but this one takes what's predominant in the 50s, the Red Scare, which is pretty prevalent in this film. It allowed me to pause a couple times to explain to Mason why that was important in this movie, what was going on in the world with the United States and Russia. I thought that was really great. All the stuff with alien invasions and saucer men, and that was all such a big part of it. The opening sequence, a great, terrific opening sequence with the jalopy and almost like an older version of American Graffiti, and Elvis playing ain't nothing but a hound dog and shake, rattle, and roll, and then
an earlier
racing
version of American Graffiti.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, okay, I said. Older is in like earlier in time.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you now. I'm with you.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I can't do math.
And then they just how it's fun until it isn't. And I think that, and for some people, that's how they felt about this movie. Go ahead. I heard someone take a breath.
I was going to mention, I pull up a couple movies that came out in 2008 as well. And it might help kind of give some gravity to where some flaws, problematic. So Iron Man, the first Iron Man came out in 2008.
I knew that was going to be the first one you were going to mention.
Yep, I did too.
And The Dark Knight. So I feel like the superhero movies were just taking off into stardom. And
Iron Man kicked it all off. Iron Man started the Marvel trend.
Indiana Jones was old school action, right? Like it was do I really want to see the old man running through the jungle?
Did Dark Knight come out that same year?
Yep. They were both 08. All three of them were 08.
And we got a various of Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, the Hancock movie. I'm just looking at a quick look. Wall-E came out. So it's
and Dark Knight was number 1, right? In the box office, and then Indy was number 2. I think that's right.
Remember.
I think that's right.
Maybe it was, but I mean, you just you're Indiana Jones is up against new competitors to some degree. And even we're talking on the eve of a Dial of Destiny, I can't imagine it's up against, all kinds of stuff today. And so we're vying for audiences, viewership. And everybody rolls their eyes oh, he's just too old, or he's just doesn't have the stuff anymore. Or, it's just it was kind of had a lot going into this one as far as, do we still want it? We still want this type thing. And obviously with Indiana Jones fans, we do, but the majority of audiences, they're kind of just over it. I'll go see Iron Man again, or I'll go see, The Dark Knight or something like that. It's just, I feel like some of that had paying, into this. It's maybe they didn't need to try so hard on the script. Like you said, maybe it needed one more once over to really capture things. What were they trying to go for? Just, to put people on audiences again. You said Raiders was up for Best Picture that year. That to me is fascinating. The fact that you didn't have a tons of movies out back in that day. So, I mean, it's just there's a whole
nothing that was genre. Action adventure that will be nominated for Best Picture. Nothing like that.
Right. Nowadays, super movies are getting Oscars. So it's the flip almost a little bit. So it's a different world in cinema in general. And so I don't know if that played into it as well. Like, I think sometimes in the back of our heads, we're actually, I want to say too, like, we were older. We weren't the starstruck kids watching a adventure go through the jungle and barely narrowly escape a giant boulder. And like, so that is so fantastical. And now we're kind of like eyeing with new eyes and saying, well, that doesn't seem to work for me because, I've seen it done better in this way. So there's a lot of maybe against it at this time and place.
I love what I think is fascinating about this, and see what you both think. I feel like the criticism of this that you are talking about and comparing to Raiders is not unlike Phantom Menace to Star Wars and how people felt about the two. But I also think over time that while, yes, Raiders and Crystal Skull, you compare them because they're in the same franchise, but you also don't. Like, I don't really think about Star Wars and Phantom Menace in the same context ever. They're different characters. There are same characters, but different ages, different stories, different things going on in the world when these things are made. They're just very separate. And the Indiana Jones films, the thing that's been unfortunate about them is that there's been so much incredible amount of time between each of them. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger between each one. In fact, Mason said, why aren't there more Indiana Jones films? So, you know what? I wish there were, but George Harrison and Steven had very busy schedules and they just could never get it to work. So the thread is very, very loose. And really, there's not a ton of, like, these are all, you could watch each of these movies individually. Like, none of these movies really, truly require seeing any of the others. They are completely 100% standalone films.
Yep.
And I find that to be a strength because at the end of the day, no matter how great so many things are that you make, there's really only one character that really matters, and that's Indy. Yep. Now, I think the most personal and the most honest and the most introspective they go into the reality of the human condition is Last Crusade. This one is just a fun love letter to Harrison Ford getting it done that far. And quite honestly, guys, if this entire movie was Harrison Ford wearing his jacket and fedora and eating pizza and laughing, listening to the radio or watching TV, I would still love it because I just really like this character. And for its foibles and things that don't work as well, Harrison's great in it. He's just great. And that's really simplistic. And that's fine. I guess this one, I really, and me, Cory and I've had plenty of discussions about this in cars, in person, in Star Cruisers, all over the place. And I like to think during movies, it's way more fun for me. And this one just makes me think about how great it is to be a dad. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love it.
And that may be why I don't respond to it as well. And I would like to comment on something else you guys were talking about. When we talk about Raiders being nominated for Best Picture, you have to remember it was the first of its kind in much the same way that Jaws, Star Wars, which were also nominated for Best Picture, and then Raiders in 81. I would also like to point out that Raiders was the highest grossing film of 1981. Do either of you know what the second highest grossing film of 1981 was?
Was it The Big Chill?
No, that was 1983. It was On Golden Pond.
I love that movie.
So, but if you want to talk about the difference between 2008 audiences and 1981 audiences,
massive.
On Golden Pond, starring
Henry Fonda and Jane
Fonda, and Katharine Hepburn.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an old person's movie, quote unquote. It is a serious adult drama, and it was the second highest grossing film of the year, as opposed to where we are more so now in 2023. But Dan, I think you're absolutely right. What it comes down to is the character, and that's the main problem. And I hate to use this term because I hear this thrown around a lot, but this is actually true for me. Crystal Skull seems like really well done fanfic to me. It doesn't feel like it was made by the same team that made the first three.
I
don't
agree.
Because of all the choices that were made. All the choices that were made, especially in that second half, are so out of step with what we got from the first three, to me.
You know what's interesting? That Dan, you made a good comment. I liked that you could watch Indiana Jones, an indie movie, and feel like it's the only one I've seen, or it's just an adventure, right? There's no connecting tissue. And I think what people want out of some of these, sequels and stuff, like they want to see connective tissue, like, oh, what's been going on or what's going to happen next to push me into the next film. And like, we got that from the Marvel franchise and wanting to know what's the next big villain or whatever the case is. And I feel like that kind of hurt this too. I think that people are waiting for, what's going to happen to the Indiana Jones franchise. Like, is it going to continue on? And because people want it so much. You mentioned Mason saying like, how come there's not more of these films? I mean, I wish there were more films, but it just didn't happen. It just didn't, it just didn't work out. So unfortunately, like that's the way it is. But I think people wanted it so bad. And when they get to it, it's not exactly what they wanted necessarily. They're like, oh, this is bad, type of thing. And it's like, there's such a buildup where Marvel movies come cheaper by the dozen in the sense of the fact there's out 2 or 3 a year. So it's like, yeah, this one hits, this one doesn't hit, doesn't matter. This one, it's just like, so when the Marvel movie comes out, you can just kind of, your arms and go, yeah, it was fun, cool, I had a good time. And it's very mediocre. And when an Indiana Jones movie comes out, so we've been such a long time period, it's rated so hard because it's like, I wanted this so bad. Waiting for that steak meal because I don't have steak every day. And so it's you rate it so hard because you love it so much. You wanted to just gobble it up. So I think there's this urge of just I've almost overthought it in a sense. I can't really sit back and just enjoy it for what it is. So I think that's what my problem with it is coming into it. The fact that like I'm too much of a fan to enjoy it. So that'd be the case for me.
Oh, that's fair. Let's talk about. I appreciate that. I appreciate both of your insights for sure, and your passions. I mean, we at the end of the day, we love Harrison. We love Indiana Jones. We love it. So I'm so happy that you're sharing this. Let's talk about your favorite, some of your favorite moments from the film, and I'm gonna kick it off. I think the motorcycle sequence that ends in the library is just terrific.
Right.
The stunt work. It's just a great little sample of Harrison's in the back seat on the bike, but he's really not. He gets pulled into that car and then he fights his way out and gets back on it and jumps up again. And of course, none of it's realistic, but none of these moments in any of the films are realistic. But the way that it's constructed, it's just awesome. And John Williams' score, which you haven't talked about, is terrific. That whole motorcycle chase, dun, 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 and then it kind of gets drives a little bit. I just think that is so much fun. I mentioned the beginning sequence. You just brought a gun to a knife fight, or a knife to a gunfight, which is the beginning of the motorcycle chase. Is great, and all the stuff with Marion, and then of course, like I said, the father son. So, but okay, blah blah. I'm just babbling because I really like the motorcycle part. Cory, what's one of your favorite scenes or moments?
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned the back of the truck is a great conversation they have, the dialogue, the chemistry. And then once we understand that they are kind of a small little family, it becomes a kind of a family adventure movie. It's like the mom and dad and son, they're in the front of that truck, and they're arguing what's going to happen next. And Harrison Ford comes out with that rocket launcher. And he's like, back up.
Yeah.
And it's just like, where'd you get that from? Like, it's just like moments like that are fun. I think, like you said, seem impractical, but exactly what I expect Indiana Jones to come through with. And you mentioned it earlier, and I hadn't thought about it until then. Like the fact that Indiana Jones in the first Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's like, I don't know, I'm making this up as I go along. Well, he's not making up anymore. He's figured it out. He's more seasoned. He's older. He's wiser.
We found out he was a spy in World War II. I guess.
Yeah. There's a lot of history there. I think.
How do you guys feel about that? By the way,
his military.
An archaeologist who is a college professor is suddenly a spy. I mean, it makes sense because of his skill set and his experience. So it works, but it's so untapped.
The only problem I have with that is that in Temple of Doom, Shatar Lal knows who he is by name. So clearly he's got some notoriety. So I don't know how effective he would be as a spy at that point.
Right. Well, he wears a mask. I don't know.
Well, he always puts on different outfits.
True, that's a good point. Yeah,
who he is. So
he shaves and you won't recognize him.
Yeah, and maybe in the academic world people recognize him, but it doesn't mean he's not like on the cover of Life magazine or something like that.
You mentioned Mutt William having the fencing stuff and having a sword fight him back. The Jeep was a lot of fun. That whole Jeep sequence is a lot of fun. it just drips with Indiana Jones and just fun weaving it out of the jungle and like them getting closer, and he's like doing the splits almost. Just a lot of fun. And I want to say too, like everybody gives Shia LaBeouf a bad time. He's enjoying himself so much. He's really made this character. He's not trying to outdo Indiana Jones. He's trying to keep up with him, which I loved that too.
Yeah.
The young kid came up with the old man, and how he calls him old man. Get on, old man, like stuff like that. Like it's just so much fun to be able to do that and enjoy the character and whatnot. So I'm trying to think of other sequences that I enjoyed.
Well, you reminded me there when after the motorcycle thing, they're in the study again, and he says, "Hey, for an old man, you're pretty good in a fight." And Indiana Jones just kind of sloughs it off because that works. Like when you're younger, that's the ego is all about, and you're always trying to prove how tough you are. There's some great lines in there. The fact that Indy doesn't even react or respond to it just shows that with age and wisdom comes like a maturity, less of a desire to prove yourself because you're just doing it. I like that subtle character piece. Jeff, what are some moments in this film or action sequences that work for you?
Well, as far as moments, I already talked about the one with Jim Broadbent, with the quote. That's
Beautiful.
Literally my favorite moment in the film. But and you mentioned the chase through the library. But one of my favorite moments, and this is from the second half of the movie, which may surprise you, but it's when Marion is the one who saves the day when she drives them off the cliff onto the branch and into the water.
Oh yeah.
And it's just a nice reminder of why they work so well together and why she is the perfect foil for him, because when he doesn't know what's going on, she does. And that's why they make such a good team. And it was just so nice to see, Karen Allen, A, in a film again, and B, getting to do something that, that mattered, doing to move the plot forward and everything. And I also it's a very small moment in the when they're in the malt shop and the fight gets started among the jocks. The way that starts always makes me laugh, and that sort of thing.
Really well done.
Those two moments, along with when Indy misjudged the jump and landed in the truck, and he said, that looked closer.
Yeah,
those are the moments that make it feel like an Indiana Jones movie, because, like we said, he's not infallible. That's what makes it work. He is human. He doesn't always do or say the right thing, but he always finds a way out of it. And that's those three moments are the ones that felt the most like an Indiana Jones movie to me.
Yeah, that reminds me. I like that whole opening warehouse sequence. I think is one of my favorite openings in any Indy film. But the fact that he's really clever about getting them to empty the majority of their gunpowder because he knows they're eventually going to be shooting at him was clever.
Yeah.
Though I do. There is a really, really bad line dub when Harrison isn't, his back is to the camera at the beginning when he's being interrogated by the Russians. That sounds really bad. It sounded bad from day one, and they've never ever modified that at all. But anyway, so anything else that we want to say about this film? And I think it's about time to give it a letter grade as well.
Yeah, as for me, I know I've talked down about it a lot, and it's one that I truly do not understand how Ed can say it's his favorite or the best or on par. I truly cannot, but I would never try to take anybody's joy away from it.
Right.
And again, it's not one I go back to often. In fact, when we did our rewatch, getting ready for Dial of Destiny, we didn't bother watching that one again because I just don't enjoy it as much. But that's not to say that there aren't good things about it. Again, you put Jim Broadbent in a movie and I'm there. I love that guy. Especially if you couple that with John Hurt, who I miss terribly. I just get so frustrated because there's so many things in it that should work, and I cannot. And I keep watching it to try to figure out why it doesn't, and I have yet to put my finger on exactly why.
Do you want
to give it a letter grade?
If I was going to give it a letter grade, I'm going to give it a C+.
Okay.
I really enjoy the first part of it, but not enough to eke it over into average or above average territory for me.
Okay. Right on. Cory, what about you?
Yeah, I like what you said there, Jeff, around it kind of revisiting it. And I found myself over the years, like, thinking that like, why don't I like this? Let me watch it one more time. And then like, I find it so funny because it's like I do get overwatching and going, oh, that's why I don't like that. But then a few years go by and somebody mentions something and like, oh yeah, I do remember. I haven't seen that for a while. I'll throw that on and watch it. And I watch it again. So it's not the fact that I hate it with a passion. I'll never watch it again type thing. It's just like you said. I kind of tend to forget why it doesn't work, and it's okay. Like it doesn't. It's okay to like you said. I'm glad that Ed loves this movie.
Yeah,
it's great, and it goes for like almost the Star Wars franchise. Everybody has their favorite or their era they grew up with, or the case is. And I think that's great.
So nothing I said persuaded either of you to look at it a little bit differently. I'm just curious. That's okay if you're.
I hadn't thought of the father-son swap, and now you brought that up. I was like, okay, I almost feel like I need to watch some of those scenes again and go, okay, what's the perspective here? I liked that so much from Last Crusade. They're bickering and arguing, and Junior and all that kind of stuff was fantastic. And I want to like revisit some of those lines and their inner dialogue and think with those glasses on. So it's something I hadn't seen before. But I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the what I like, don't like about it, and what I like about it. So it just isn't great. But like you said, if something says Indiana Jones and the blank of the blank of the blank, I'm sitting down and I'm watching it. I don't give let's go. I'm in. Like you said, I'm a fan. I will always watch these movies as they come out, or whatever the case is, whatever is coming out next.
We only got one more.
Well, you never know. But
with Harrison, yeah,
fair enough. But for my letter grade, I'm going to give it. I almost went C+, but I just love talking about this in dialogue, and like it does kind of enhance the movie for me. The things I haven't seen, just perspectives. So I'm going to go B-.
Okay.
And yes, Dan, everything you mentioned, I see it all, and it all makes perfect sense. And I get why you love it. It just didn't. I see that it's all there. It just doesn't land for me.
No, I'm glad. I'm so appreciative. I when you text me and said, asked about tonight, and I was so happy that you were going to be on because I wanted to hear what you had to say, and I really, you didn't disappoint. Neither did you, Cory, of course.
Thank you.
I give it a B+. Yesterday I probably would have given it an A-, but watching it again, the fact that the second half is a little bit longer, and I think it needs to be. And there are a couple of gaps where they explain it, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense. Although some of it might honestly just be above my head. That's very possible too.
Sure.
But I love so much the dynamic that he has with Marion. And while Mutt isn't my favorite character, he's far from my least. I appreciate him. I want him to be in the new movie. I like the idea of him. He's very much a product of the 50s. It's just smart. There's a lot of smart stuff here. Even the people get upset about the CGI gophers. I still think they look great for 2023. I thought they were fine. I thought they were cute. It made Mason laugh. And it's got one of the greatest images or stills from any movie I've ever seen. It's when Indiana Jones is standing on this like embankment, and there's this massive mushroom cloud that he's staring at, and there's this beautiful, absolutely beautiful silhouette. To me, very much symbolizing this man is a relic of a world that is just going to explode past him, and there's so many more dangers that are just out there. Now, none of it's as powerful as the Ark of the Covenant, which they do a lovely wink to at the beginning of this film. But it's really symbolic. It very much how sort of fandom almost passes him by too. I'm doing meta commentary here, but it's powerful. But that being said, while he's still in the shadow of a world that's passing by, he's still him. He's still constant. He's still wearing the pants and the World War I gas mask bag and the leather jacket and the fedora and the sharp white shirt. He's still him in a constant where things are falling apart. And I think that is why I appreciate this movie so much. When this movie came out, it was my second or third year of teaching. I was so hungry for a new Indiana Jones film. I waited in line for hours to get an autograph of Harrison Ford on a Crystal Skull image, which I got. I went to toy stores all the time and bought all the figures, and I still got them. And Displayed them in my room, and I just had it all. I was so excited. I went to the theater and saw this movie in full Indy gear, completely cosplayed, and I loved it. I went and saw it in the theater, I think 4 or 5 times. It just made me so happy. When I left, I had promised myself after I saw Phantom Menace that I was not going to go to another movie I was excited about and let myself be so disappointed. Very much allowing for the possibility that it might not be what I wanted. But at the end of the day, if I want a great Indiana Jones film, it exists. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. So as long as I've still got that and they don't unwrite that, is this the best Indiana Jones movie? No, it's really not. But it lands well for me. It may not land well for you, and that's okay too. Again, at the end of the day, while we're having our coffee together, talking with our families and friends, it's the discourse, it's the conversation, I think, that is so captivating, which is why I had to have the two of you gentlemen on.
Sure.
Cory, I think we won the podcast.
We did? Oh, great.
Hey, anytime you guys are on a podcast, you win it. We're the winners because we get to hear from the two of you, which is so wonderful.
Yes, the winners are the listeners.
Make that a t-shirt.
Yes.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Do with that what you will. Jeff, thank you so much again for coming back on the show. It's never too early for me to chat with you, and I very much appreciate you sharing your time and talents. Please let everybody know what is going on in the world of Jeff McGee, Marvin Dog Media, and podcasting.
Well, we this was coming out. We're sort of on our summer hiatus, or coming into it, I should say, for all the shows. But in July, yes, in July we'll be back with new episodes of Talking Toys with Taylor and Jeff, the Saturday Morning Supercast, the pilot episode. So I'm looking forward to those. And Star Wars Splash Page is still going strong. This past week, we had 5 books to discuss because Dark Horse decided to release the last 3 issues of High Republic Adventures Volume 2 on the same day. Which was a shame because if you're not reading it, it's a really fun book and it's a really great story. I highly recommend it. But you can find all of those wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can go to marvindogmedia.com and find that. You can find me on Twitter at the Jeff McGee. I'm on Blue Sky now. I'm one of the cool kids. I got in on that, so I grabbed Count Jeff on that one, so we're good there. And on Instagram, Marvin Dog Media everywhere as well.
Excellent. And Cory, I had so much fun hanging out with you on the Star Cruiser and getting to see you again and getting to spend some time with you and your family. We just had a great time. It is always great to chat with you naturally. I'm sure we'll be talking again very, very soon on CWK Pour-Over, our Patreon show. But please let everybody know where they can reach out and find you.
Sure, you can check me out on Twitter at Cory Clubb if you want to follow me there. I'm currently on hiatus there because of Indiana Jones. I just want to stay spoiler free, but feel free to reach out there and follow me and see the hijinks. But if you have more thoughts and want to know more about what I got going on as far as Pour-Over or anything else, feel free to email me, coryc@coffeewithkenobi.com.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.